Welcome back to another episode of the Format Podcast. We got a good one today for you. Shouldn't be too long. Going to talk a little college football and college football playoff and inequities, have nots. But that's life, isn't it? But before we get to that, you know what we got to do. Let's go ahead. Make sure if you haven't already, click that subscribe, that like, and that notification bell so you know when new episodes of the show come out. And you can be with us every time that happens. Also, if you want the audio only version of the show, of course, you can go to your audio podcast platform, type in the Format Podcast, do a quick search, and we should come up. Please make sure you leave us a comment both on YouTube or your audio podcast platform. And make sure you give us that 5-star review. All that helps us rise in the algorithm, helps us find more sports fans, helps more sports fans find us. Finally, if you know you enjoy the show, you like the out-of-the-box thinking and not the same old that you hear from all the other sports shows, please go ahead and share it with other sports fans you think might enjoy it as well, all right? Okay, let's get right to it. So, college football playoffs just came out last Tuesday night, I'm sorry. And we got an interesting little shakeup, which honestly kind of surprised. And I obviously with Tennessee beating Georgia last week, what we would see was Tennessee probably dropping to the 3rd or 4th spot, and Georgia obviously jumping back up to number 1, because at that time Tennessee was number 1 and Georgia, I believe, was number 3, right? And so what do I always talk about? If you watch this show, you know when it comes to college football and the playoffs and the rankings, I always scream from the mountaintops about SEC bias and how they do things in terms of the rankings. What do I mean when I say how they do things in terms of the rankings? What I mean is I always talk about how they make sure that they bunch a bunch of SEC teams highly ranked so that when they beat each other, it won't hurt them and they won't drop too far. And, you know, that has played out. I mean, so number one, let me make sure I say this. The SEC is an outstanding football conference in its top half, right? Its bottom half is as bad as anyone else. You got teams like Mizzou and Arkansas and Texas A&M and, you know, these teams, Mississippi State, that are just bad, right? So, you know, it is what it is. But with that said, yeah, I always talk about it. And if you pay attention to the rankings every year, you'll see it does bear out, because it seems like the goal is simply to ensure that you always have, wherever possible, 2 SEC teams in the playoff, because, well, there's a lot of factors involved there. Number one being money, and the other being those parties, I'm not going to name any names, who are involved in the broadcasting and the finance and et cetera of the college football playoff. Now, moving right along, I was surprised to see Tennessee actually drop out of the latest college football rankings and drop down to number 5. And TCU from the Big 12, they're undefeated right now, actually jump up to number 4. So as it stands right now, if the playoff were to happen this week, you'd have, of course, number 1 Georgia facing number 4 TCU, and Ohio State at number 2 facing number 3 Michigan. Now, that stuff is going to shake out, because TCU, if they can remain undefeated, still has a Big 12 championship to win, or to attempt to win. And of course, Ohio State and Michigan have that huge clash coming in the final game of the regular season, and then one of them will likely have to play in the Big 10 championship game. So there's some things to still be decided. I think it's fair to say that Georgia will likely be a representative in the college football playoff, unless something goes ridiculously off the rails and they lose a couple games, which is likely not going to happen. LSU is looking like they have the inside track to represent the SEC West in the SEC championship game. And if they beat Georgia, which I don't think they would, but it's going to be a heck of a game. If they beat Georgia, they will. It's almost inarguable that they'll be the first 2-loss team to make the college football playoff, because I can't see any way possible that an SEC champion, no matter how many losses it has, doesn't make the college football playoff. Like, they're just not going to let that happen. That'll ruin all the narratives, et cetera, et cetera. But that's a different story. So moving right along. By the way, we see how many times that, you know, because of the bias the SEC gets, that you have situations where they get more than one team in. So I'm thinking, if Ohio State and Michigan are both undefeated leading into their big game, right? And they're both at 2 or 3, and maybe Ohio State is number 1 by that time, or Michigan's, and who knows, right? But they're both undefeated, and one of them obviously has to lose, and it's a tight game. Let's say one of those 32-30 or something like that. It's a tight game, one score game, and whoever loses, and then the other maybe drops to number 4, and the other one, the winner, goes on to win the Big Ten, right? Why couldn't we see 2 Big Ten teams in the playoff? I'll tell you why, because they're not the SEC. If we don't see it, then the hypocrisy will be out there, right there for everyone to see. But of course, they'll come up with some excuses. Now, the point of my show here is they, being the powers that be and many of the voices in college football, are telling you the regular season doesn't matter. What do you mean, Bruce? How are they telling me this? Well, you got a guy like Paul Feinbaum. We know he's a noted SEC guy. He's with ESPN. We know that. 3 years ago, Clemson beat Notre Dame, I want to say like 30-3 in the college football playoff semifinal. And he came on ESPN a day or two after that and basically said Notre Dame should never be allowed back into the playoff. I mean, come on. Then you have a guy like Colin Cowherd responding to the most recent college football playoff rankings. And
And the top 4 teams are Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, and TCU. They'd make the playoffs. The 2 just on the outside are Tennessee and Oregon. There's LSU and USC too. So college football has this built-in guilt. They feel they need to put a good story in the playoff every once in a while instead of the 4 best teams. So if you go back to the beginning, 8 years of the playoff, they've done it 3 times, where they put a team in there that doesn't really recruit at an elite level. They put Michigan State in 2015. They got housed. They put Washington in 2016. They got suffocated. They put Cincinnati in last year. A way better story than a team. They got smoked. And if you look at the top 4 this year, who doesn't fit? TCU. Because if you're really an elite recruiting NFL factory that can win a national championship, you bulldoze about 8 teams on your schedule. Ohio State blows out people. Michigan blows out people. Georgia blows out people. Oregon can blow out people. TCU's blown out nobody. TCU is slithering by Big 12 teams. Last year, TCU was 45th in the country in recruiting. Or this year. They don't have, there's only like 40 NFL guys from TCU. It's a good program, but it's the classic college football mistake. There is a guilt associated with college football that you got to wedge in every couple years, that undefeated good story. Here's all you need to know. This weekend, TCU is a touchdown underdog to 3-loss Texas. Vegas knows the truth. Stop with a good story. Get to the good teams. We know who they are. Oregon can play with anybody in the country. I know opening game against Georgia was a mess. New coach, new staff in the South. LSU can play against anybody. Tennessee can play against anybody. Come on, this is not a shot at TCU. But once you shrink a club, my standards for membership are going to be very rigid, and my standards are going to be very high. So college football my entire life has been haves and have-nots. TCU is not a top 10 have. They don't recruit like it. They don't look like it. There's nothing wrong with them going to a great bowl. And this is why I am rooting for a 12-team playoff. Because then TCU can get in, and somebody that's got big boy players everywhere doesn't have to be forced out.
So Colin Cowherd is on his show, great show by the way, but he is telling you that the regular season doesn't matter. If you don't have a high enough recruiting class, or you're not one of the blue blood names. And I get it, the college football playoff is not necessarily about literally the 4 best teams. It's about money. It's about the big names. Think about this. Do you know what the college football playoff would give for Texas to get in and be competitive? Do you know what they would give for USC to have been undefeated this season so they could get in and represent the Pac-12? Why? Because USC is a huge brand name, right? You can assume that their fans will travel. You can also assume that they will bring in the viewers. You can also assume that the college football powers that be would love to have a Pac-12 representative in there to bring in those eyeballs from the West Coast that they've been missing since they seem so fixated on the SEC and their fans for so long. Because no matter what we think, and let me say this, the SEC's motto is, it just means more. And I can tell you, I live in Florida. College football does just mean more in the Southeastern Conference and in this part of the country. There's no denying that. Now, with that said, there's no way that you can tell me just from a mathematical level that if you took all the revenue generated by the SEC, it would outweigh all the revenue generated if you had the West Coast, right? And maybe the East Coast, the Northeast, Mid-Atlantic, more engaged in the college football playoff and the college football season, right? There's no way, just mathematically, it doesn't work out. So I get that it just means more to the fan base down here, but if you're talking dollars and cents and just math, there's no way. So, the powers that be would love to have USC in the college football playoff. Now that said, back to Cowherd's comments. What he's saying here, he's basically being an elitist and a college football snob. And I get that, and that's fine, but don't try to mask it in anything else. Oh, you've got to be a football factory and you've got to recruit better, blah, blah, blah. Who cares, right? It's about if a team is good enough to have earned that opportunity, then let them play, right? Don't tell me, oh, they got housed, so they shouldn't be in there. That's BS, right? What matters is these guys have earned their opportunities to be there and to compete. And if that's how it goes, that's how it goes. He mentioned 2015 when the Michigan State Spartans got smoked by Alabama. I think they got beat like 38-0 in that semifinal. And okay, it was not a good game, but guess what? Those Spartans were undefeated and won the Big Ten, which is not arguably, but almost definitively the second best college football conference in the country. Are you telling me that because of the result in the college football playoff, they didn't deserve a shot to be there? Like, that's ridiculous. Cut it out. So by Colin's logic, if you get to a championship game and you get smoked, then you didn't deserve to be there. All the work you put in, all the wins you got should be irrelevant, right? Wrong. So the NFL, we call that the league with the most parity in American sports, right? So let's just go down the line. I'm going to give you some Super Bowl scores, right? Super Bowl, which means the two best teams in the NFL played for the world championship that year. Let me give you some scores. Super Bowl 1, 35-10. Super Bowl 2, 33-14. Super Bowl 4, 23-7. Super Bowl 6, 24-3. I'm just going down the line here. Super Bowl 8, 24-7. Was it Super Bowl 9, 32-14. Super Bowl 11, 27-10. What do we got? Super Bowl 15, 27-10. I'm doing this for a reason. I know it's getting tedious, but I'm doing this to make a greater point. Super Bowl 18, 38-9. Super Bowl 19, 38-16. Super Bowl 20, 46-10. Super Bowl 21, 39-20. Super Bowl 22, 42-10. Was it Super Bowl 24, 55-10, right? Was Super Bowl 20, I'm sorry, I'm these Roman numerals. Super Bowl 27, 52-17. Super Bowl 28, 30-13. Should I keep going? Are you seeing the point? Super Bowl 35, 34-7. Super Bowl 37, 48-21, right? This is what we're seeing. Super Bowl 50, Super Bowl 40, 21-10. So I'm not going to go through anymore, but you get the point. There are a lot of blowouts in the Super Bowl, which has a bunch of pros, right? Which obviously has outstanding coaches for the most part, which has the two best teams in the league almost always, right? So, I mean, I really don't understand this. I really don't understand. Super Bowl 48, 43-8. And so I say all this to say, let's stop with the, if you get blown out, you didn't deserve to be there. You earned your right to be there. Clearly, you didn't play your best on that day, and clearly you faced a team that was better than you. But if you earned your right to be there, you earned your right to be there. Let's look at that 2017 UCF team that calls themselves the national champion, right? That was an outstanding team. And if you look at it, because they were an AAC team at the time, next year they'll be Big 12, but they were an AAC team at the time. No one was giving them credit. Obviously, I guess they had too high of a climb to make it into the top 4. But that was a team that could have pretty much played with almost anyone in that season, right? You look at them the following season, I think they only lost one game. They lost in the Fiesta Bowl to an LSU team that had Justin Herbert, right? It wasn't the LSU team that was all-time great with Justin Herbert the following year, but it had most of those players on it. So, I mean, I look at it and it's I mean, just to say, oh, well, they don't recruit. They're not an NFL factory, blah, 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 this, that, and the third. It's just ridiculous. Oh, by the way, that 2017 USC team, guess what? They played Auburn in their bowl game, right? This is an Auburn that beat Alabama and Georgia in the same season, and they beat them 34-27 in their bowl game. So I say it all to say, we can go with the narrative that UCF didn't have the recruiting chops or the blue blood name or what have you. But guess what? You earn your opportunity to play. You should be able to go play and take your shot. We need to stop with this nonsense of the brand recognition or the recruiting ratings or whatever. Now, if you want to just be honest and say, hey, it's about money. We want not just the 4 quote unquote best teams, but we want the teams that will draw the best. We want the teams whose fans will travel the best. We want the teams that will help us in our networks in promoting and carrying and covering this thing. Just say that, but don't be out here trying to come up with nonsense. All right. So that's all I have for this. What I'd like from you, go ahead and leave it in the comments section. Let me know if you think that brand recognition and recruiting chops and recruiting rankings should play any role in whether or not a deserving team to be included in the 4-team playoff. And also let me know if you believe that the outcome of said bowl game means that a team should not have been there in the first place. All right, so thanks for listening in. Can't wait to see you next time, and I'm out. Peace.